to be clear,
he said that C5 could be used for that. I asked specifically.
Could be.
Yes, they haven't said would be, but it will have to be for LNG, for example. LNG phase 2 would take emissions to a level that didn't fit in BC's climate plan, so they'll have to use it. They
won't use it. So far, they have not said they will use it. They could do a lot of things, but they haven't done them. We're 6 months into the term.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back. My name's Natasha, and this is Behavior Breakdowns. I have my co-host back there today, although he's currently taking a nap, so we'll see if he tunes in at any point for any additional commentary or input. Today we are breaking down the body language of Pierre Poilievre. Now, I've already broken down Pierre on the channel before, but last night I saw a CTV news interview with Poilievre and Vassy Kapelos, and I couldn't help but think this is an amazing example of really good body language. So this interview was a standout for me because for an untrained eye, it looks relatively locked down. Pierre hardly even moves around in his seat. He's really locked in. But to someone who pays very close attention to body language, we train ourselves to look for subtleties and we train ourselves to look for clusters of change. And sometimes those clusters of change don't always come in big, grand movements. Sometimes they can be an increase in blink rate, and sometimes it can be a simple adapting behavior like rubbing one part of the skin against another. So let's break down this interview. I think it was a great one for both Pierre and Vassy, and let's talk about some of the body language and behavior that we see.
We have never faced a U.S. president that has leveled the kinds of economic threats that he has against our country. He has specifically targeted investment as a cause for that, saying, I want investment to come to the United States. That's part of the reason I'm doing this. Like, is it not normal that companies would then follow suit when they're faced with that threat? Is it fair, really, to put all the blame at the government's feet?
You know what I think is fair? Let's hold Mr. Carney to the standard he set for himself. He said he'd have a deal with Trump by July 21st. Still no deal. He said that he would put elbows up. He put elbows down. He said he could handle Donald Trump, and all he's done is make concession after concession on his own economic decisions. Mr. Carney said he would spend less. His deficit spending is 100% more. He said that he would bring more investment, and we've had a record exodus of investment since he became Prime Minister.
So we're jumping into this interview a couple minutes in, and we have Pierre starting out with that vocal click. That's when the tongue hits the roof of the mouth, creating that click sound. We also have a subtle smirk start to crawl up on his face. Now, some of you will like that, some of you will hate it, but it is a little bit of a smirk. He knows that he's got a good line coming, and he's talking about what's fair and holding Mark Carney accountable for the things that he said he would do. So what's interesting about this interview footage is that it's mostly a medium shot, meaning that we have just the upper chest, we have the shoulders, and we have the upper chest, but we don't see too much of the hands. They're below the frame. And when we do see the hands, it's actually when the camera is pulled back so that we have both Vassy and Poilievre in the frame, and that gives us a wider shot. So we're able to see Pierre's hands when they move around on the desk. When we're in so tight on the medium, we're mostly looking at Pierre's upper body. We're mostly looking at his facial expressions, his eyes, and even what he does with his mouth. In that wide shot, we actually see Vassy retract a little bit in her seat when Poilievre mentions Carney's spending. We see her kind of move back, and her hands are gripped together there. She's locking in as well. It can just be a comfortable way of sitting, for sure. Sometimes people will sit with their hands in their lap, so context is always important, but I see her hands locked in there, and she has that moment where she moves back, bracing herself for what Pierre is saying.
That's why, despite Mr. Carney's promise that he would make us the fastest growing economy in the G7, we're now the fastest shrinking economy. And on one last point, he's in Mexico, or just coming back from Mexico. Great laboratory, right? Because we're both next door to the United States of America. So how have we both done relatively? In the most recent quarter, Mexico's economy grew by an impressive 2.4%, while regrettably ours shrunk by 1.6%. Mexican exports to the U.S. are up, while ours have collapsed by 18%. And of course, Canadian unemployment, I regret to say, is 3 times higher than Mexico. So Mexico has the same problem. We both share America as our neighbor and biggest trading partner. So what have the Mexicans done right that Mark Carney's done wrong?
Well, the Mexicans capitulated to Trump. They didn't.
So is Mark Carney.
No, but they didn't levy any. To be fair, they didn't levy any counter tariffs. Mark Carney has, in fact, levied some, but not in a totally commensurate fashion. And then you criticize him for that, right? You said it's elbows down if you do that, but you're kind of lauding the elbows down approach of the Mexican government because it got them a better result with Trump. So which is it?
So now we see some interesting hand gestures coming out from Poilievre when he talks about Carney being in Mexico. He too backs up in his seat. He does have a little bit more of an amused look on his face, and he starts to use his hand gestures to show the balance between the relationship of Mexico and Canada to the United States. This is a scale. This is a body narration. It's a gestural metaphor. So a couple of other things that I'm seeing here in this interview is a lot of eyebrow raising from Poilievre. Now, people raise their eyebrows for a number of different reasons, but it does tend to happen a lot around social approval and social recognition. Around the idea of social approval isn't just a question of whether or not this person approves of me socially. It's more a communication to say, are you understanding what I'm saying? Do you understand my ideas as I'm presenting them? So the eyebrows tend to raise around that. The other thing that I want to call out is we are seeing some eye blocking from Pierre. Eye blocking happens for a number of different reasons, but I would say the most common reason it happens is because someone is a part of a conversation that they don't like or they don't want to be a part of. They no longer want to think about that information, or they are trying to retrieve data and they're trying to block out stimulus around them so that they can go into their mind and retrieve that piece of information.
Mark Carney said that he would put in dollar for dollar tariffs, and now he's basically backed down on everything. What you don't do in a negotiation, what we're finding is that Mr. Carney, it was a real bait and switch for him to say he knew how to negotiate, because we're seeing him in action now. What you never do is threaten something and then withdraw the threat without getting anything in return. And he's backed down on dollar for dollar tariffs, on the DST, the digital services tax, on military spending, on all sorts of other things that he promised to Canadians and threatened to President Trump. And as a result, the president smells weakness. Now the Chinese see the same weakness, and they're hitting our farmers and fish harvesters. So we have far higher tariffs from both China and the U.S. today than was when Mr. Carney took office, promising that he would end the tariffs.
So I can appreciate how Pierre is so still in this interview. Now, I'm not saying that he's so still that he's not using his gestures, but he does have this locked down presence where he doesn't fidget in his seat. We don't see him doing some typical stress responses. I just broke down Chrystia Freeland on the channel, and if you want to see stress and how that manifests in the body, then definitely go check out that video. It is such a stark contrast to someone who is so still, even though they're in a relatively stressful situation, having to answer questions on the spot and having to have questions presented to them in a bit of a challenging way. Now, he's the leader of the opposition, so he needs to be prepared for these types of things.
Mexico, you've just detailed, has a much better result. What they did was not put any counter tariffs on. They sent 10,000 troops to the border. Obviously, the problems at the border are different. Like, they are viewed as one of the many countries who, in essence, capitulated to the demands of Trump in order to better secure their economy. Even though it's not dollar for dollar, our government has not done that. Are you saying that you would have dollar for dollar tariffs? You have 50% counter tariffs, for example, on aluminum and steel?
To be clear, Mark Carney has capitulated. He's removed almost all of the counter tariffs. So
25% remains on steel and aluminum.
He has capitulated on almost all of the counter tariffs. He's reversed himself on everything. What would I do? I'd pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would make us more independent by opening our country for business. We would repeal all of the anti-energy laws and anti-resource laws, the Northwest BC Coast shipping ban, the industrial carbon tax. I would make it so that capital gains tax is zero when businesses or investors reinvest their capital in Canada, opening mines, factories, pipelines, and other job-creating economic infrastructure that would make us more self-reliant and less dependent on other countries.
We do see a huge spike in blink rate there for Pierre. Now, Pierre's blink rate is higher than the average person, I would say, but he does have a spike in blink rate here when he says Mark Carney did capitulate, and we see that increase in blink rate. Now, an increase in blink rate usually does indicate stress. When somebody is so locked down, those are the subtle, simple gestures that we have to look for to see stress and to try and better understand the processing going on in their mind. So we do see that spike in blink rate. We do have some more gesturing going on here as he illustrates some of his points. And I've said in the past, on the last video with Pierre, he does often drop into this cadence when he's giving a press conference or when he's speaking to Canada as the audience. He goes into this cadence that is sort of like delivering those points.
Which would make us more independent by opening our country for business. We would repeal all of the anti-energy laws and anti-resource laws.
We don't always want to feel like our politicians are just delivering us these little lines that are talking points. It tends to lose a lot of its value when we hear the same things over and over. It gets repetitive. It doesn't feel authentic.
It allows the government on a case-by-case or project-by-project basis to override many of the energy and climate laws that you just spelled out. I know that your position is...
Can I ask
No,
a
I
question?
understand. Just let me finish for a moment,
Sure,
if I may.
please.
I understand your position is that the better signal would be to get rid of them altogether. But I've also heard you cite this LNG terminal off the coast of Germany quite frequently, how quickly they were able to get that built. The German government employed a piece of legislation almost identical to C5 in order to accomplish that. Why, if that is a positive example for you, is that good enough there, but here you still remain critical of the approach?
So we all agree, this is where we can put partisanship aside. We have the most resources in the world over here, but we have to get them developed and shipped over here. What's standing in the way? Liberal laws and liberal bureaucracies. Mark Carney's solution to too many liberal laws and bureaucracies is to create more laws and bureaucracies.
I also think this is a strong interview for Vassy. Now, I've seen her do this before where she has been interrupted, but she continues to make her point and continues to get the question out. She actually motions for Pierre to stop and let her finish. I think just having that moment where Pierre recognized, I shouldn't interrupt, and Vassy said, you're not going to interrupt, you're going to let me finish, and Pierre said, yep, you're right. It's just a simple moment, but I do think that was kind of nice to see, in my opinion. We now have Pierre also illustrating more with his body. He's basically essentially drawing out a map showing we have things here, we have to get them to over here. So he's using his gestures to narrate and illustrate what it is that he's saying, basically turning his gestures into a visual medium.
I know that it's the Trudeau government that then decided not to appeal that decision, but it's not as though in the absence of the laws that you criticize, you saw booming resource development. In fact, even with the laws that were in place over the last 10 years, oil production in Alberta and Saskatchewan rose to record levels over the last 3 years.
So actually, oil production is rising everywhere. It doubled in the United States. It has risen far faster in the US than it has in Canada. Investment in Canadian oil has plummeted compared to the way it was 10 years ago. And as for, you want me to comment on the Harper era policies?
Well, no,
because there were 3 massive projects proposed in the Harper era and ready to build. But when Trudeau came in, he killed them. He killed Northern Gateway. And let's be clear, we have to get away from making excuses for the Liberals. Their cabinet made the decision to kill the Northern Gateway. No. They made a cabinet decision to kill the project. There's a record of decision by the cabinet that said we will not go ahead. It was, in fairness, it was an election promise.
We do see a lot of congruency from Pierre as he makes those points, and we see the hand also follow along with the words that he says. What's interesting is that I see Pierre's lower eyelids harden here. Now that often comes around scrutiny and thought. Just try to harden your lower eyelids. Just try and do it right now. That gesture usually just comes around when someone is thinking deeply of something. It might come across as being critical, and if you look closely, it's again one of those very subtle and simple body language gestures, but once you start to notice it, you will see it everywhere. So we do have things heating up a little bit more here when Pierre talks about the Liberal government killing the Northern Gateway pipeline project, and Vassy goes to speak. We actually see the mouth come open a little bit, but she retracts and lets Pierre finish his point. Vassy does interrupt at one point, and Pierre goes, no, that's not the case. This is the fact, and I'm going to continue to deliver it.
And by the way, Mark Carney testified in the industry committee that he opposed the Northern Gateway. Furthermore, on that subject of a pipe from northern Alberta to the Pacific coast, today, Mark Carney and the Liberals have a ban on increased oil production to put the oil in the pipe, and a ban on shipping the oil out of the pipe.
Both of which they say C5 would override if the case for it was there.
But they're 6 months in, and they still haven't said they would override either of those things.
On a case-by-case basis, they have. Explicitly, I've interviewed the energy minister, and he said so.
To be clear,
he said that C5 could be used for that. I asked specifically.
Could be.
Yes, they haven't said
be.
Would be, but it will have to be for LNG, for example. LNG phase 2 would take emissions to a level that didn't fit in BC's climate plan, so they'll have to use it.
They won't use it. So far, they have not said they will use it. They could do a lot of things, but they haven't done them. We're 6 months into the term. If you want a pipe from Alberta to the Pacific, you need to legalize the production of the oil going in the pipe and the shipping of the oil coming out of the pipe. Mark Carney has done neither, and he has not even announced he's done either.
We also see the hand coming down there on the desk. Now, I always say that if you do need to ever gain control of a room, let's say you're giving a presentation or you're leading an interview or a classroom and things are starting to get a little bit wily or unruly, a really good way to gain control is to use a palms down approach. This always commands respect. It's basically like you're saying, sit down, sit in your seats, I'm the one in control. And the palms down approach is always much more respectful and generally perceived better than a finger point, which tends to be quite direct and uncomfortable. I love to see the interviews getting heated in this way that still is kind of self-contained, and it's not out of control. It's not, disrespectful in any way, but it's starting to get a little bit heated between them. Pierre lets Vassy finish. She does interrupt him, but she goes on about the point of the bill C5 and what it contains, and Pierre is set on his point that absolutely they won't use it. So Vassy is arguing the point is there. Pierre is saying it doesn't matter because they're not going to use it. We see some eyebrow raising from Pierre. Again, that's that social approval. Do you understand what I'm saying? They are not going to use that bill even if it exists. They don't plan on using it. It's just there. So there we have that finger point come out from Pierre. It's a bit more aggressive than the palms down. It's the next step up. Now he's got to finger point to deliver.
And that is why the company that was originally going to build Northern Gateway has already said they wouldn't even consider putting a shovel in the ground for such a project under Carney's current legal regime. But you know what they are doing? I'm talking about Enbridge now. They're building 2 pipelines in the United States of America, creating work for workers, jobs for American workers, American steel producers, American energy workers. Why is it that yet another Canadian company is taking billions of dollars out of Carney's liberal economy and sending it south? I want to bring that money back home, and we've got a plan to do it.
And we have our co-host here returning finally as the video is coming to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. In the last little clip here, we see more of the same from Pierre. I really respect the fact that he's able to lock in a lot of those body language leaks when it comes to feeling stress and feeling nervous. He remains quite stoic. Even when we do see more of his body, we see the hands on the desk. He's using those gestures strategically. He's using them to deliver his points. The gestures are congruent to what it is that he's saying. And I think both himself and Vassy did a great job in this interview. Vassy asked really great questions that were challenging to Pierre, and Pierre answered those questions in a way that wasn't deflective of the question being asked. He manages to stay on topic, he delivers those points, he delivers the facts, and I really think this was a super strong interview for him, and both for him and Vassy as well. Again, you can like or dislike either of these people. I'm just here to call out the body language as I see it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How did Pierre's body language and behavior hold up over the duration of this interview? And do you think Vassy was partisan enough for a news reporter? Should she have gone in a little bit harder? Should she have reeled it back a little bit? You guys let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. PJ, come here. Come here. Oh, that's a good boy. That's a good boy. Okay.